OWT. First Alert 6 starts now.
Good evening. First tonight, an Omaha hospice nurse is speaking out after getting disciplined by Nebraska's Attorney General. Two nurses from Endless Journey Hospice are accused of mishandling patient medication, taking meds from deceased patients, and falsifying patient records. First Alert 6's Andrew Pfeiffer is live in this newsroom with an exclusive. Andrew?
Brian, Melanie Costlow has been a part owner of Endless Journey Hospice since the company opened its doors in 2016. After facing allegations from the state, Costlow tells me she's focusing on the positives.
None of that happened knowingly. None of that was done with ill intent.
In April of last year, the state opened an investigation with Endless Journey Hospice following a self-reported incident.
There are employees that are no longer employed with Endless Journey.
Following investigations, State Attorney General Mike Hilgers issued a 14-page petition of disciplinary action against two of the nurses. Melanie Costlow was one of them.
Those were charges, but at the same time, it's what's on a sheet of paper. It's not how this company acts.
The allegations against Costlow included failing to report misdemeanors on nurse renewal applications, transporting medications from a deceased patient, and allowing staff to sign medical reports as a physician. The other employee was accused of mishandling medications in an unlocked cabinet and signing patient records also as a physician. Costlow claims that she was unaware the employee was keeping the medications. She also says an automated computer system unknowingly marked employees as physicians.
I will tell you that we had a system. All hospices have a system that they chart, and we changed our system.
The final accusation was failing to report prior misdemeanors. Costlow said she had an attorney at the time who was unaware she had to report them.
That was not done maliciously. That's not me trying to hide from the State Board of Nursing that I got caught driving without a driver's license.
While there is no longer an active investigation, Costlow will serve out a 90-day suspension and pay a $10,000 fine.
I don't want Endless Journey to suffer for something that we've already been through, that we've already handled, that we already took care of.
Costlow says she's grateful that Endless Journey will be able to continue to stay open.
If the state of Nebraska truly felt that what we were doing, if it was to the magnitude that is being displayed, which breaks my heart, that our doors would not allowed to remain open.
The biggest challenge, navigating trust with future patients.
The love and the care and the compassion that Endless Journey has been providing for well over a year to these families after this, after the investigation was complete, is truly who we are.
Costlow tells me her suspension has not started yet, but likely will in the coming days. Again, the other nurse was terminated, and Endless Journey can keep operating. Reporting live in the newsroom, Andrew Pfeiffer, First Alert 6.